The impact of the electric universe paradigm is unprecedented. It's probably the biggest paradigm shift in history, simply because, as one mythographer has pointed out who's come across our work recently, modern man acts like Bronze Age man in the 20th century. We act on the basis of mythology, which involves all of the characteristics of the Bronze Age, the warriors and the whole way of thinking and looking at the world is still of that vintage, if you like. The electric universe is one which is a connected one. And the fellow who put forward this view of modern society in terms of Bronze Age man and what does the future hold, said the electric universe is the only available cosmology to underpin a new mythology. And society operates with this underlying mythology. And the principal aspect of the electric universe, which will ensure we have a future on this planet, rather than destroying ourselves and everything around us, is the connectedness of us all, and our connectedness to the planet as earthlings, and our connected to the universe as sentient beings. Once you have that sense of connection, all of the petty nonsense and irrational and insane behaviour that we witness today has a chance of being healed. But that comes from understanding our real history and the history of the earth and our real place in the scheme of things. Velikovsky came across the understanding that the ancient peoples had suffered a terrible disaster, a catastrophic disaster, which was on a global scale. He did that because he was studying the biblical references to Moses and that kind of thing, and that meant that he was looking at the destruction wreaked upon the ancient Hebrews and so on. And he was looking for an Egyptian reference, and he actually found it in a papyrus in the Leiden Museum in Holland, the Papyrus Ipuwer, it was called. And here was a list of the plagues of Egypt. In doing all of that work, though, he realized that there was something, whatever had happened was of a global nature, not of just a restricted geographic area. So that set him off on this forensic search, looking for what you would expect, understanding modern physics, you would expect to have happened on the other side of the earth, for instance. And he took the day of Joshua, when the sun stood still, as one of those episodes, and said, okay, if the sun's motion is disturbed on one side of the earth so that the day was longer, what would you expect on the other side of the earth? So he went to the American continent and looked for stories there that had been preserved. And lo and behold, they had a long night, and the stars fell from the sky and all the forest burned. Well, the stars falling from the sky was meteoritic showers and so on. It was only after Worlds in Collision was published, some years later, he published Earth in Upheaval, and that's probably a more accessible book for somebody who wants to understand the story of what happened on Earth and the evidence for it in geology and archaeology and all of that kind of thing. And Velikovsky, as a result of that, made a prediction which is the kind of prediction you need if you want to have an outrageous proposal taken seriously. He said, before anyone else on Earth had any idea, that Venus would be hot, not just tropical, but he said it had been incandescent within the memory of mankind. And of course, the Mariner missions were sent to Venus, and Mariner 2 came back that, my God, it was 600 degrees. And Velikovsky said it'll be even hotter. And I think the later landers, the Russian Venera spacecraft and so on, came back, it was 800 degrees. The temperature at which some metals are actually molten. Velikovsky was right. He was the only one on Earth who was right. Now, when people can do that, they should be their work should be examined very closely indeed. He was also the first to propose that radio noises would be found from Jupiter, because remember, Jupiter was the god of the thunderbolt, and the thunderbolt, of course, represents extreme electromagnetic energy. He was correct. Einstein, in fact, was moved to support a request to have these ideas tested. One of the things that I do try to stress at the end of my presentations to a general audience is the message that Velikovsky gave at the end of his, towards the end of his life in the book Mankind in Amnesia. And he, as a trained psychoanalyst, recognised that mankind suffers from a kind of post-traumatic stress disorder, where we've witnessed, not us, but in the past we have witnessed events which we've never been able to face up to. And when that happens, the amnesiac pushes the memory down, but the subconscious knows it in some way, and it keeps surfacing. And the way that humanity tends to deal with it is to see a war movie, see some sort of story which has a crisis and then a resolution at the end, so that you come out feeling satisfied. But if you've been through something like a war zone or that, and there's no satisfactory outcome, the effects can be long-lasting. And Velikovsky said that a person who has suffered an amnesic episode tends to want to revisit it. Now, you can revisit it safely by going to a horror movie or a war movie or something like that. But what the human race tends to do occasionally is that it generates a leader or someone who will try and reenact the destruction of the gods. And now that we've got nuclear weapons, Velikovsky was afraid that we are now in a position to wreak the destruction of the gods on ourselves and the planet. The only way out of that is to understand ourselves, understand our past, and that was his parting message, really. And that's not easy. This is one of the things that has to be done carefully, because a patient who is confronted with this revelation can become violent, can, really become a problem to deal with. I think the electric universe model needs careful handling in how it is actually presented. But the story for our future is that if we are actually to have a long-term future on this planet, we will have to come to terms with all of the irrationality that bedevils us presently, all of the really tough problems. What do they call them? The wicked problems that society faces. They will only go once we have this old mythology. We can discard it, leave it behind, because the electric universe doesn't have that. It actually explains that old mythology and why we had it, and it explains our irrational behaviour, our warlike behaviour, our destruction of the planet, our acquisitiveness, all of the things that are at present causing great difficulty. So the electric universe is the only way, I think, ahead to have a long-term future on this planet, and to understand how we might become real grown-up citizens of the universe.